seems to me that the purpose of life is to find a mode of being that is so meaningful that the fact that life is suffering is no longer relevant. Now, I have a follow-up, just a segue from that, but is that an accurate quote?
Well, I don't know if it's an accurate quote, but it sounds like something I probably said.
An accurate sentiment,
it's
more
accurately
or less.
attributed.
Accurately attributed, all right.
It seems to me that it's true. I mean, it isn't necessarily the case that you can do it.
All right. Yeah. So
it's hard to do. I mean, and that, of course, it's hard, I suppose, in proportion to the suffering that you're undergoing. And it isn't necessarily the case that you can always manage it, but sometimes you can manage it, and it's good if you can. See, people need to search for meaning because they get corrupted by suffering if their life isn't meaningful. That's how it looks to me. Because you can't torture an animal forever without it lashing out. And so if your life is nothing, if there's nothing in it that speaks to you, there's still going to be suffering. You can't talk yourself out of that. And so then I see people tearing down traditional structures, let's say, or they're casual about them. Another rule in this new book is do not casually denigrate social institutions or creative achievement. Well, why social institutions? Well, I've counseled lots of people who were lost. And so if you came to see me and I was your therapist, I'm very practical. I'd say to you, okay, well, let's look at your life for a minute. Do you have an intimate relationship? What about your family? And that could be, married with kids, or it could be the family of your birth, your siblings and your parents and so on. How's that functioning? Do you have anyone there? Do you have a job, or maybe a career even if you're fortunate, but at least a job that keeps body and soul together and maybe where there's some chance of advancement and hope? Do you know how to use your time outside of work productively? Do you take care of your mental and physical health? Do you manage the temptations, drug and alcohol use and that sort of thing? Do you manage those temptations effectively? Are you educated? Are you as educated as you are intelligent? Have you? And those are standard patterns of activity in the world. Do you have kids? Do you have a wife? Or a husband? Do you have a job? I mean, it's mundane in some sense, and you can look beyond all those standard answers for meaning. But if you're overwhelmed by life, anxious and suffering, that's a good place to start. Put that together. Why? Well, the answer to that is because that's what people do. That's what people do. That's the best we've been able to manage. And if you don't have that, because you're a human being like other human beings, you're going to suffer for it. And so attacks on that, assaults on that aren't that helpful. Like I have this friend, he's an atheist, and he's wavering about this. He was born a communist. He was raised in Poland. And he had objected at one point to the Christmas traditions of his family, who were also atheistic. And, he objected on the grounds of logical coherence. Why are we doing this? Well, don't do it. Well, then what happens? Well, then you have another weekday. You lose Christmas. Well, great. It's like now you're logically coherent. Wonderful. But you've lost Christmas. You don't want to throw these things away. When I see this sometimes with young people when they're talking about getting married. We don't need to get married. We don't need a piece of paper. It's like, really? That's the depth of thought you've put into this? It's like you're not going to mark this permanence with conscious awareness and social celebration and the sanction of your community and a beautiful ceremony? That's just nothing? You're going to let that go? Well, what are you going to replace it with? Nothing.
What would be a successful effect for this book? looking back 12 months from now, 24 months from now?
Well, it would be lovely if it had the same effect on people as the last book appeared to have. I mean, it's comforting to me to read through my YouTube comments. Oddly enough, because that isn't generally a place people would go for comfort. Untold numbers of people have said to me in person, but publicly in that way, that they've put their lives together, at least in some ways. And you talked about Viktor Frankl. When I wrote Maps of Meaning, I said, well, I was interested in malevolence. I was deeply affected by the accounts I'd read of what happened in the Second World War and in Germany, and what happened in the Soviet Union and in China. These horror shows that characterized the 20th century. Constrained malevolence. And so if you study malevolence, you start to understand what the opposite of that is. The opposite of malevolence is something like the hero's journey. And it's easy to be cynical about that, but, well, it's not that easy, because if you're cynical about that, then you undermine your own life. And everyone knows this. This is the other thing that's so interesting. Everyone knows this. You never teach someone you love to lie. You're always appalled if you have a son or daughter. You're always appalled if they don't tell the truth. You know in the deepest part of your heart that if you don't tell the truth, the world falls apart. And that's actually true. I talked about unearned wisdom. It's no trivial matter to understand that. Dostoevsky said everyone is responsible for everything that happens to them and everything that happens to everyone else as well. And, that's an insane statement, and he was a very extreme person, but it's also true. And I think that's part of what people get a glimpse of when they have a hallucinogenic induced religious experience. It's like, there's a lot more resting on you than you think. And you know that. You don't wake up in the morning berating yourself for telling the truth. You wake up at 4 a.m. berating yourself for violating your conscience. I'm aware of all the criticisms of ideas like that, but it's really something that you can't control your conscience. So what is it exactly? It's not you. You're responsible to it. It holds you accountable. It transcends you. So what is it? Well, if you think it's nothing, well, violate it for a while and see what happens. So, I hope what I wrote in Beyond Order is true. And if it's true, it should do some good. Because what's true does good. At least that's the hope.